You were doing fine until you saw what someone else had. Not a stranger, someone you know, someone roughly your age, roughly your background, roughly your starting point. And in the space of about 3 seconds, your own life rearranged itself. The job that felt solid a moment ago now feels like settling. The apartment that felt like yours now feels like a temporary situation you have not yet resolved. The relationship, the savings, the body, the trajectory, all of it suddenly held up against a different version of what was possible. A version that someone else, apparently, is living. You did not ask for this comparison. You did not decide to make it. It arrived on its own, uninvited, and it brought a specific feeling with it. Not quite envy, not quite sadness. Something more like a quiet, persistent dissatisfaction with the shape of your own life. You have probably tried to reason your way out of it. You know that social media is curated. You know that everyone has problems you cannot see. You know, intellectually, that comparison is a losing game. And yet the next time you see the post, or hear the news, or sit across from someone whose life appears to be going better than yours, the comparison happens anyway. Faster than thought, quieter than decision. This is not a weakness. This is one of the most deeply embedded social mechanisms in the human brain. And it has been there, doing exactly this for hundreds of thousands of years. Understanding why it works this way will not make it disappear, but it will change what you do with it. Here is what is actually happening. Social comparison is not a habit you picked up. It is not a product of social media or modern insecurity or a generation that grew up measuring itself against highlight reels. It is a feature that predates language, predates agriculture, predates civilization by an enormous margin. It is woven into the architecture of a brain that evolved in a world where knowing your position relative to others was not a vanity. It was information you needed to survive. Psychologist Leon Festinger at the University of Minnesota introduced what he called social comparison theory in 1954. His core insight was simple and has held up across decades of research. Human beings do not evaluate their abilities, their outcomes, or their lives in absolute terms. They evaluate them relative to other people. You do not ask, "Am I doing well?" You ask, "Am I doing well compared to the people around me?" The comparison is not optional. It is the mechanism by which the evaluation happens at all. Festinger noticed that people compare most actively when the reference point is close, someone similar in age, background, and circumstance. Not a celebrity, not someone in a completely different world. Someone in your category, someone whose choices and outcomes feel, on some level, like a direct reflection of what was possible for you. This is not accidental. In the ancestral environment your brain evolved in, the people most relevant to your survival were exactly this kind of person. Not distant rulers, not strangers in other territories. The people in your band. The people whose skills and resources and status directly affected your own position in the group. Knowing how you compared to them, honestly, accurately, continuously, told you where you stood, what you needed to improve, what threats you needed to manage, what opportunities you might be missing. The comparison was not cruelty, it was calibration. Neuroscientist Jamil Zaki at Stanford University has studied how the brain processes social information and found that status comparisons activate the same reward and threat circuits as other survival-relevant signals. When you compare favorably, the brain releases a small dopamine signal. When you compare unfavorably, when you discover that someone in your reference group is doing better, the brain generates a stress response. This is processed not as a thought, but as a feeling in the body before the conscious mind has even finished registering what it saw. This is why seeing a former classmate's career announcement can ruin a morning before you have decided how you feel about it. The ancient evaluation system runs faster than reflection. It has already delivered its verdict. You are catching up to a judgment that was made before you could intervene. But here is where the mismatch opens up. In the ancestral world, your reference group was small, stable, and real. 50 to 150 people. People you saw every day. People whose lives you understood in full context. Their struggles, their setbacks, their losses, as well as their successes. The comparison was embedded in actual knowledge of another person's whole situation. If someone in your group had more food than you today, you also knew they had been sick last winter. The comparison was balanced by proximity and full information. Now your reference group is theoretically everyone. Every former classmate, every person you have ever met, every stranger curated by an algorithm to show you the most impressive version of themselves at the most impressive moment of their lives. The comparison mechanism your brain inherited is running on a dataset it was never designed to process. Researcher Kross at the University of Michigan has studied how social media use interacts with the social comparison drive and found something that clarifies the pattern. It is not simply that social media makes people feel bad. It is that passive consumption, scrolling and observing without active engagement, triggers upward social comparison almost continuously. You are seeing the highlight reel of hundreds of people simultaneously, and your ancient calibration system is reading each data point as if it represents a real, complete picture of someone's life in your actual community. It does not, but the brain does not know that. This produces a specific distortion. In a real community, you would naturally see the full range of human experience around you. Success and failure, gain and loss, confidence and struggle. The social information would be balanced. The comparisons would be grounded. In an algorithmically curated feed, you see almost exclusively the upper tail. Everyone's best moments, everyone's proudest announcements, everyone's most photogenic version of their life. Your calibration system reads this as, "This is what is normal in my reference group," and then it evaluates you accordingly. Psychologist Sonja Lyubomirsky at the University of California, Riverside has studied what she calls the social comparison orientation, the degree to which people habitually use others as a reference point for self-evaluation. What her research shows is that people high in social comparison orientation are not simply less happy. They are more reactive to comparison information in both directions. Good comparisons produce a bigger boost. Bad comparisons produce a bigger hit. The sensitivity itself is the issue, not any single comparison. And social comparison orientation, she found, tends to increase in environments where social information is constant, salient, and algorithmically selected for maximum emotional impact. This is the environment you live in. Understanding this does not mean withdrawing from social life or deleting every app. It means recognizing what the comparison mechanism was built to do, and what it was not built to do. It was built to calibrate you within a small, known community of real people whose full circumstances you understood. It was not built to evaluate you against an endless, curated, algorithmically assembled gallery of peak human moments. The discomfort you feel when you compare unfavorably is real. It is your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do, but the data it is running on is wrong. The reference group is false. The picture is incomplete. You are being evaluated against a standard that does not represent reality. That cannot represent reality, because the algorithm that assembled it was designed not to inform you, but to activate you. Knowing this does not stop the comparison from happening. It happens in the subcortical circuits, beneath deliberate thought, faster than you can intercept it. But it can change what you do in the moment after. Whether you treat the verdict as accurate information about your life, or whether you recognize it for what it is. An ancient calibration tool running on a manufactured dataset, arriving at a conclusion about your worth that the evidence does not actually support. You were doing fine. You still are. You just need a more honest reference group.